Welcome to Hashtag Narrative, a Football Manager podcast where we sit around the virtual campfire and recount stories from past saves. Unfortunately, 1 week wonder, Mr. Kev, he's departed again already. So, we have no Kev, if that's not clear for you. Robot Kev isn't even here either. He's been retired, he's going in for another upgrade. I don't know what he needs upgrading this time, but apparently he needs something upgrading. But we have the absolutely beautiful northern tones of TeachFM. Toby, how are you, sir?
I'm very good, Matt. How are you?
I'm alright. It's very rare that people actually ask me how I am, so it's nice to be asked.
I'm just being very polite, or try to be. I wasn't expecting Kev to be here, because he's 1 in 3 now, and he was here last week, so I pretty much had it down as a given that he wouldn't be.
Well, at least you're anticipating his absence, and so you know that he's not going to interject with random questions and really stitch you up. Instead, that's my job to do that as well. So, yeah, expect stupid stuff. In fact, I will defend myself there because no one else is here to do it for me. And if Kev was here, he would lambast me. But I think I've done reasonably well at going slightly off-piste recently, but on topic, and asking about tactical stuff and how people approach things. It's been relevant for once, rather than just ridiculous tangents about penises and everything else under the sun.
Both tangents suit me fine, either way.
I thought you'd like a tangent.
I do like a tangent.
Just a tangent. Right, we better get started before the dick jokes start getting a bit too frequent. Obvious starting point is when did FM first captivate your attention? Now, you were an older man as well. I don't mean older man as in like you're basically on death's door, but it's in terms of Football Manager creators, you are one of the older ones, despite being a newer one.
One of the old guard, almost, without, as you say, being around all that long. I'm 33 now. 33 years young, that is. And I always struggle to remember which game it was, what I very first started. And I'm pretty sure it was Championship Manager 2. Now, I'm Mancunian, obviously. I think obviously with my accent. I
couldn't tell.
I'm sure you couldn't.
Toby.
Now, way back when, I was born and bred in inner city Manchester. I wasn't from a privileged area out like that. I didn't have the worst of upbringings or anything like that. I didn't want for much as a kid, but wasn't from the most affluent family or anything like that. And we used to get this disc known as a blobby disc, right? And ultimately, it was called a blobby disc, and my old man used to get a hold of it. We had a PC at home, which a lot of my friends didn't have PCs. This was at the time of, I think we were still talking about bloody Super Nintendos or maybe Nintendo 64 or something like that. But we had a PC, and I always felt quite fortunate. I've been using PCs since MS-DOS, etc. And anyway, we got this blobby disc back on point. Try to be anyway, without giving some sort of life story and life lesson.
The thing that terrified me was that you said your dad got a hold of it, and I wasn't sure what you were referring to. But carry on.
Terrible, terrible man. Anyway, so this blobby disc, and ultimately, at top and bottom of it, it's pirated software on a disc, and it was a regular release, because I seem to remember my old man used to get these all the time. And amongst the myriad of games on said disc, I remember playing things like Grand Theft Auto before any of the kids at school knew what it was. They were all like, they'd never even heard of it. And then, of course, a year later, 2 years later, so forth. And amongst all this was Championship Manager. Now, prior to this, I'd played a game called Premier Manager. It was on floppy disk. And I remember it was only one league that you could... And the only thing that I remember a couple of things from this game. And I know we're talking about Football Manager, so I will get back on point, I promise. But it came with like this wheel thing, which was your code to basically say that you've not copied the game onto another floppy disk of someone else. And every time you started the game, you had to spin this wheel. And you had to line up a couple of symbols, and it gave you like a little code to type in. So basically, it was like early forms of copyright protection, if you like. And I always remember that Halifax Town were the team to be, and they had a player called Hansen. Now, this was a long time ago. I've never even been back to look who that is. So that's where my football management games started, and that I was really young then. But my first football manager title, if you want for a better word, of course it was Championship Manager. I'm pretty sure it was Championship Manager 2, and it was a pirate copy. So yeah, there's a bit of news for you, a bit of exclusive.
Exclusive.
Teach does
Mank
copyright.
person is a thief.
Thank you.
Is that news? Is it really news?
No, probably not.
Basically, the North, I'm going to put all of my armour on, getting ready for the pelters that are coming my way for basically stating that every person from Manchester is a thieving bastard.
Oh, you bad man.
But I've not said it.
No, of course you've not.
I've just implied it.
Yeah.
So
just cut that bit from the video.
Yeah, probably best, to be honest.
Podcast. But yeah, so anyway, so that was the first one. And me and my brother's a year older than I, so we were quite close growing up. And we just spent hours upon hours upon hours playing that game. And we had another very close friend who, and we as a group throughout childhood or growing up, as it were, because this must have been, you're probably talking 20 years ago, if not maybe a little bit more than 20 years ago. We basically grew up playing it. It became a stalwart in what we did when we finished school. If the weather wasn't good enough to go out and play football, we'd either be round at my friend's house or he'd be round at our house, and we'd all be playing Championship Manager. And it's just, the love affair started then and has never rescinded. There's been times and patches where it's gone away, where I've found other things in life like women or booze, but I always managed to come back every time. So yeah, so it's been a long ride, and one that I am nowhere near ready to get off is probably the best way of describing it.
See, I'm rather envious of that. You having sort of a bank of friends that you were, or your friend and brother that you can sort of relate to with these memories. I only ever had one friend at school that I could speak to about Football Manager. I don't know if there was a lot of other sort of closet players, but it wasn't exactly the coolest thing to admit to doing, especially when you've got the likes of FIFA out, and the Pro Evo. I think, in fact, Pro Evo was the title that you would be wanting to play at that point. But Football Manager really wasn't. In fact, no, that's a lie. There was two people. There was one person that I knew would play it religiously. In fact, probably more so than I. And then there was another who was he was a couple of years above me in school. And then there was another who, I think, in fact, he gave me a copy of 99 2000 at one point because I'd lost my disc or something like that. But I didn't have that. I suppose that level of appreciation from friends of this addiction, and I think having people to share that burden with you, or at least appreciate you saying, "Oh, I don't want to go, I don't want to go around the park today." Why is that? Oh, because I've got to get United to the Europa League final or the Champions League final or something like that, or I want to bash through some more games on this, and they'll say, "Fine, we'll come and help you."
Yeah,
and I never had that sort of camaraderie, I suppose.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, don't get me wrong. We still had our other games that we played, and you mentioned Pro Evo, and at the time I seem to remember having an N64, and it was International Superstar Soccer Pro Deluxe at the time, yes. And that's when it all started, Pro Evo, and the commentary on that. Oh, tremendous!
Incredibly awful.
Yeah, tremendous. It was
the yellow team have the ball. Brazil are attacking.
Because, of course, at that young and carefree age, it was all about football. This was before partners and girlfriends and wives and children and work commitments and everything else.
Football was your mistress, your wife.
Absolutely. It was absolutely everything. Yeah. And if we weren't out kicking a ball against a wall or at the local park or whatever we were doing, genuinely, we were indoors all huddled around the same computer. And we were all the same manager. We were all making decisions for each other, especially in the very early games where we never really played as separate managers. But yeah, it was it is quite nice to sort of think back. And since then, I no longer. I mean, I live in a different country now, but I no longer have the connection with my friend. But my brother still does dip in and out. Football Manager. He still fully understands it. He's played very recent versions. I'm sure he had last year's, if not the year before. And I'm pretty sure he'll come back. And there's been many a time. In fact, since I've started on YouTube, he's on the phone all the time. Oh, what's your episode last night? And we genuinely, we roll back the years and we'll discuss about decisions I've made during a game or decisions I've made about transfers or not transfers. And he'll be nudging me in a direction where basically he believes I'm wrong. And look, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Do this.
That's fantastic. You know? Assistant manager by proxy.
Absolutely. And genuinely, it still happens to the point where we was talking today about an episode that went live yesterday. And he still does it now. And I think by nature of me now living my Football Manager on YouTube has probably pushed him into getting the game this year when he was probably not going to bother. So, yeah, it's good.
Brilliant. Well, that neatly leads us on to my next question, which is about your most favouriteest save ever. So, what is it, and more importantly, why? Now, I know you're fairly new to the whole YouTube thing, as am I, relatively, I suppose, but you've only really showcased one save on the platform, so I'm assuming you've got a load of others that you might be wanting to pick from.
I have got absolutely stacks, but it's hard because we've just sort of partially discussed it, but we ended up, a few years later on down the line, we ended up taking on 2 teams, and it was me and my brother and this chap. We'll call him Anthony because that was his name. I had a nickname for him, and there's Anthony, and he took on Barcelona, and we took on Real Madrid. Now, this was at a time when Real Madrid they'd not signed Beckham yet. Beckham was still at Manchester United, but of course they still had what was and will always sort of in my mind be remembered as pretty much one of the greatest teams you've ever seen, and Barcelona by no means were poor, and it wasn't there was nothing special that happened in that save that makes me remember it, other than the fact that for a change, rather than us all sat round one person playing the game, it was a right, your turn now, move over, change, we'll hit continue and you carry on, it's your turn. And I think it's more of an emotional memory than a memory of the save itself. And it was just one of those things that it continued on the whole summer. And from a success point, me and my brother had none. Literally, it was Anthony was doing well with Barcelona, would you believe? But if I had to pick out a save, it would have to be that. They always say you sort of always sort of remember your first and your best one, and my first saves were and not just my first one save, but multiple saves thereafter were always United. Being a United fan, being mad on football, and sort of when we did this sort of we went to Spain to manage, as it were. It was something a bit different, but I remember being, because it's so many years ago now, but I remember being massively engrossed in the save, but not actually bloody winning anything. But yet still wanting to get on with it every night, but having to coordinate with Anthony and make sure he was available to continue the save on. And the disappointment if he wasn't or I wasn't, and so forth and so forth. So unfortunately not the greatest tale of success and everything else, because I've always managed quite big teams. So I've always been, having played the game for so many years, I find success relatively easy to come by, whether I've been a smaller team or a bigger team.
What's that? Oh, that's your horn, I believe.
That I'm tooting it right now.
You need to stop turn it off.
It's a funny old game, Football Manager. I actually still think back and think back to when it was just commentary only. I mean, now we're blessed with 2D pitches and pretty awful 3D pitches and stuff. But when you've been playing it as long as you have, and you get to an element, and we've discussed this before, but when you get to an element, you can pretty much read the flow of a game in Football Manager within reason, and I find it hard to do bad. I suppose. I mean, I'm not saying I've gone out on every team I've won something. Spurred on by Dr. Benji last year, I went and took FC United to Manchester, and I never continued it all the way through. Never got to the Premier League, but I relatively easily got to the Championship with very little obstacles along the way. And I think there's only 1 year I didn't get promoted on the bounce. But success, the success stories of playing Football Manager don't equate to the emotional involvement I had as a younger man, having that anticipation to get to play Football Manager. As I've got older and I've get to make my own decisions in my own time, I can pretty much sit down and play Football Manager whenever I want. But I remember back then it was a fist pump moment if you knew that you were getting in and you were getting on Football Manager. And it's just one of those memories I've always clung on to.
Oh, that's lovely, actually. I think that's very poignant.
Tear to my eye.
Just one.
Just one.
Single solitary tear.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any sort of favourite players from that particular save, or indeed any other save that you've played over the years?
Now remember, back then, I've got a couple, two players.
Well, that is a couple. So.
Yeah, well, I can bring more to the table if that's what you need. So first one, Robbie Keane. Now, you might think, that's not exactly some sort of wonder kid or unknown.
Before you carry on, how far back are we talking here?
We are talking when he was at Coventry.
Oh, there we go. They're the words.
Oh my Lord, Robbie. What you could do in that game, it must have been, was it 98, 99 or 99, 2000 or...
Something like that.
It was back when Championship Manager and you had the arrows, right? Yeah. So I'll always remember this because way back then, I did not have the tactical nous I have now as a Football Manager. By no means. Back then it was like just slap them on the pitch and move them slider bars where you want them and go, right? Now, Robbie Keane sat behind the strikers with the run arrow towards the strikers. Unbelievable. 35, 40 goals a season. Keep him fit. He was an absolute revelation. You couldn't stop the lad. No matter what you tried, you couldn't stop. In fact, it was like cheating, basically. So you start a game with the lads and it's like, before we start the game, are we going to identify some transfer targets? So, don't want to tread on anyone's toes. But before we get started, no one's allowed to buy Robbie Keane because it's just not fair.
I love that.
But Robbie Keane, way back then, because, he was just an absolute monster and there was no stopping him. And some years later now I can probably roughly work this out because he's still about, this lad. I think it must be 10 years ago, I would say. And he goes by the name of Henri Servette.
I remember the name.
He was at Bordeaux and he was 16, 17. He was free, basically. And as a free player, he was game-breakingly good. I used to sign for United because I'd always be United. Whenever I get a new Football Manager, it'd be my own team, be United. It lets me settle in the game, suss out what's what. And he was an absolute tank of a player. For free, at 16 or 17 years old, I don't remember his stats off the top of my head now, but he had 13, I'm pretty sure he had 13 in finishing and composure, and he was quick as well. But within literally like 3 years, he was breaking into 19s and 20s in almost every area. It was ridiculous. Pretty sure it was a bug because the lad didn't turn out that good now. He's playing at Newcastle or he's on loan, possibly now, I think. I think he might be back in France on loan. But yeah, they're the two that always stick out just because of the amount of success that those two players brought me over the years. There's other ones, along the way. The likes of, I think Chris mentioned Kerrison. And then, of course, you got to bearing in mind, like a few years ago, before the whole Neymar excitement came along, there was Ganzo.
Ganzo.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever listened to the World Football Phone-In. It's on 5 Live occasionally.
No, but go on.
If you ever get the opportunity, listen to it and listen for Tim Vickery, he's the regular guest on that. He's a Brazilian football expert.
Yes.
Listen to him pronounce names. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's Paulo Henrique Ganso. It's anyone who's listening who knows what I'm talking about. The one story that always sticks out for me on just, I know it's a tangent, but it's relevant to what you were saying about Ganso.
Yeah.
He frequently says about Wanderlei Luxemburgo when he was at Real Madrid.
Yes.
He was the manager when they signed Jonathan Woodgate.
Yes.
And when, obviously, Jonathan Woodgate's from the northeast, so he's got a bit of a different accent to most of the people in that locker room at that time.
Yeah.
And he apparently the way the Brazilians pronounce things isn't like how we would pronounce things over here.
Yeah.
And so he would be screaming at the top of his lungs, "Udegate, Udegate, Udegate." That's basically how you say Woodgate, but with how the Brazilians pronounce the letters.
Wow.
So you can kind of understand. Uda is the WOOD.
Yeah.
And Gaethje is how they say gate. Is brilliant, and there's loads of names like that, and that's what I love about football, really. Like the fact that, and also like Gus Poyet is another one. Yeah. It's Poget. It's not Poyet at all, or Poyet. It's Poget.
Courgette.
It does, yeah. It's with a courgette with a P. Basically, it's a cock-looking courgette.
It's a cock-looking vegetable. But yeah, I mean, they're the players. As I say, there's players who I won't even remember now, having played the game that many years ago, who were good enough to maybe be worth a shout. But if I have any success stories, they were pretty much over those periods of time built around Henri Servette. And Henri Servette's best friend was Sacco, who's at Liverpool now. And I seem to remember, he struggled settling in. He used to buy Mamadou Sakho as well as Henri Servette just because they were best friends. He was on his favourite personnel, so I used to try and help him settle in. He actually turned out to be pretty decent as well, to be honest. But if I had to nail it down to one, it was Robbie Keane, and as I say, it must have been 98, 99 when he was still at Coventry, because he was just...
He played for some glamorous teams, didn't he? I mean, you try and plot out a career. You put out Coventry, Wolves, Inter Milan. Where the bloody hell did that come from? It's insane. Like, his real life trajectory is probably more insane than his football manager trajectory.
Yeah.
And he's the one player that seemingly manages to get away with loving every single club he's ever played for. It's like I used to live with a guy after university, and we would frequently make a joke whenever Robbie Keane made a move to another club that when's his statement coming out? When's this going to become his dream move this time? Yeah. Sort of thing, because he was known for making that statement every single time he joined a new club.
I mean, he must have moved around for some money. I mean, I seem to remember back when Inter Milan bought him, it wasn't cheap. They spent
it was like 18 million or something.
They spent a lot of money on him, back then. And then when you look at the transfers he's had since, it's...
You look at the Liverpool, how much did they pay for it? That was about 18 million, I think, wasn't it? 17-ish, something like that. And then he buggered off back to Spurs. He has cost a lot of money over the years, like in terms of like accumulated transfer money spend. It must be pretty mental.
Yeah.
I completely forgot he played at Leeds as well.
And at Wolves.
Yeah, he's been everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Well, he started at Wolves.
Yeah, started at Wolves, and that's when he moved to Coventry. I think Coventry paid a few quid for him. They paid 4 or 5
6.5 or something like that. Yeah, that's what rings a bell.
I'm sure he wasn't.
6 million.
He wasn't there long before Inter Milan came knocking, and
he was there for a season. Inter Milan, he played 6 times for Inter, didn't score a goal. Although he cost Inter £13 million in year 2000.
And what's he do nowadays? Didn't he just recently become available again after?
Has he left? I don't know if he's left LA Galaxy or because he was on. Since he's been there, he's been on loan and all sorts. Yeah, he's been he's done quite a lot. In fact, what's he doing now? I don't know.
Who last played for Major League Soccer team LA Galaxy as a forward. It's I don't know what he's doing right now, but
Let's not speculate because, well, he could be doing anything, couldn't he, Phil?
Yeah.
Little bugger.
Yeah. But yeah, I honestly don't know. It looks like in 2016 was the last time he played for LA Galaxy, and I'm not sure he's played it. I mean, he's probably on his way to China, with the rest of the mercenaries.
Of course they are.
But
the rest of the mercenaries, shots fired.
Yeah, shots fired indeed. I'm glad I'm not a Chelsea fan. I'd be wanting to string Diego Costa up. But yeah, Robbie Keane is the one. If I have to remember anyone, and it was that. I mean, he was obviously adjusted somewhat in later games and was never quite as good. He was never terrible, but for that one game when you could sign him from Coventry, he was just lethal as an attack mid centre. I
think OP is what the kids would say these days.
Absolutely.
He is OP.
OP, sick, and many other things that I fail to understand.
You've got it all to come yet, with your kids sort of speaking in basically rhyme or rhythms that you have no idea what they're chatting on about.
I'm pretty sure in the not too distant future they just pull an emoji face to communicate to each other.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's going to be like an implant or something that basically adjusts their face accordingly. You've got little robot arms that adjust sort of things, do silly eyebrow stuff and things like that. Forget muscles. What do people need those for?
Yeah.
Just let robots do it. It's fine. Let them take over the world. Anyway, tangents galore, as ever. Would you ever be tempted to go back to any particular save that there's any? Maybe like you were saying about saves it when you're a young lad. Would you ever be tempted to try and recreate that sort of thing now in, say, Football Manager 2017?
If me and my brother lived local, I mean, I suppose you can network game now, but it wasn't the same as having two chairs pulled up to the desk on the same computer and then you saying, right, there's your turn. I suppose if me and my brother, we'd maybe do something. But I mean, I play the same save all the time and be United again. Obviously, not had the greatest of squads over the last few years, but I mean they're overpowered to death on this year's Football Manager. But if I could go back and play any one, I probably wouldn't, because I think the best left there, and to move on and try, because I don't think you could ever replicate any enjoyment or excitement from them. My current save I'm doing right now, I find very exciting, but it's because I've put it on YouTube and I've used this phrase before, but it's like I'm documenting my Football Manager journey almost, and because I no longer have a circle of friends that play Football Manager, it's been great, because there's nothing worse than something happening, a decision in a game or a goal that's been scored or a certain title that you've lost at the last minute because some poor team at the bottom of the leagues just beat somebody else or something, whatever it may be, and not having anybody to tell. And I feel, as I'm recording, I'm telling someone, even if it's only watched by a few people, I'm telling them. And I think I couldn't also relive my United save next year, because it's locked in now with YouTube, if you know what I mean. So I think the straight answer is no. I wouldn't go back, because situations are different, and I don't have any out and out save that was so tremendously brilliant or engrossing that I would like to try and replicate, if I'm brutally honest.
So I'll play devil's advocate here a little bit. Then. So say that United got relegated, so the scenario is completely different. Would what about then? Would you then maybe look back at then consider like, this is a prime opportunity to say return to the Fergie way. I've got to now rely on the kids. The Glazers are gone because they don't want anything to do with, because that would be like the worst scenario for United, not just for the club as a football team, but the club in general from like a marketing perspective. The whole entire planning behind everything, it's the football club is a sort of a vehicle to push a gigantic business model forward.
Yes,
and I can only imagine what would happen. No Champions League. all of the sponsors. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the sponsors have like clauses written into the contract saying that if you ever get demoted to X division or something like that, or if you don't achieve, a certain level of, don't reach a certain qualification stage of the Champions League, or don't win the FA Cup or whatever, things like that they've got clauses in there built in to either reduce the fee or for them to be able to pull out entirely.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Adidas do with that big kit deal.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's based on Champions League qualification. I'm sure of it.
But if that was if that scenario, something similar to that was to happen, and stranger things have indeed happened. We've seen the likes of, Leeds were mismanaged, but they, in terms of the business, but they were one of the first teams that was deemed too big to go down.
Yes,
like Blackburn, obviously they dropped out of the Premiership 5 years after winning it.
Yeah,
but they weren't a big team like Leeds are. Now, this is a Blackburn fan saying this. Like, Leeds have got a 40,000 seater stadium. They've got a gigantic following that even when they were in League One, they were still pretty much filling it every single home game. And they also had, I suppose, they'd had a lot of players that had done really well. They were qualifying for Champions Leagues.
Yeah,
like consistently over a few seasons. They had a lot of really good British players at that point.
I seem to remember they had a cracker. I can't remember his name. It went by the name of Eric Cantona or something along them lines. Way back when. Don't know what happened to that lad. But he was.
I thought you were going to be referring to Eric Backer, but hey, there's only two famous Erics.
Yeah, but yeah, they, as you say, I think with United, if something was to, of course, I say that I wouldn't revisit a save. One of the first things I said is I do every year. I revisit United and I play them every year. It's a refresher for the game, because some years I won't play till the end of the year, till the very next one's out. What it gets like, it's the football season comes to a close and there's no international tournament, and it's like it sometimes falls off the boil and I find myself doing other things, and so sometimes I'll use United as a refresher. So I suppose yes, I would go back, because the likelihood is I will be United again at some point. But I think now that I'm doing YouTube, I think it would be relatively unproductive to come back and do them into, say, FM18, because at the moment I'm doing daily content and I'm only in today my final episode of season 3's gone out, and tomorrow season 4 starts, and I've only been doing YouTube for a little over 2 months, but it's taken that long to get to season 3. To the end of season 3, whereas if I was just sat on my own and I wasn't recording a thing, I'd be on about 9 or 10 now. So yes, I would revisit saves, but only under certain circumstances. I think if something drastically, really, really bad happened to Manchester United over the course of the next few years, I absolutely would, because I would feel duty bound to do so.
Kind of like I am going to be with Blackburn, I think, at the end of this season.
Yeah. It's obviously, I know
maybe revealing too much behind the curtain about my potential plans for Football Manager 18, but there you go.
I think with what Blackburn have got going on at the moment, and your rant video the other day, I think it was pretty much a given as of that point.
Possibly, but that's if they survive,
yes,
in terms of financially, and don't go into administration and do a Pompey.
Well, it's one thing being ran by Venkis, it's another thing being managed by Mowbray. So.
Well, there you go. In fact, I bet they just thought it was a pie, and thought, "Oh, this is a new thing that we're gonna, we want to get this involved. We can put our chicken in that, exactly, chicken balti pie."
Oh.
That's what I thought they were going for, and they're like, "Hang on a minute, what's gone on?
Yeah,
who's this bloke? We were expecting pastry."
But yeah, obviously, if something big happened, it never will. I'm not sure United would ever get that bad. Things have happened.
Imagine if, the reason why I don't mean to be so morbid, to be honest, but you get ridiculous events happen. It's happened recently with Chapeauense. you get an air disaster, it depletes an entire team.
Yes, of course.
And it's happened to United before, famously, obviously. But these things do happen, and imagine if that would. Thing is, I get the idea that people would see it in a bad taste to do it because you're kind of trying to profit off a bad situation, but it would make such a good save.
Yes,
really proper Busby Babes style rebuild. Yeah. That would be incredible. To watch that happen and unfold. Oh, I would buy a ticket for that. Honestly,
I would say it's gone from morbid to almost devious, Matt. I'll be brutally honest. You've just almost lived through it.
The thing is, though, you could make it I think the BBC did a documentary on the Munich air disaster. I think it was during the 50th anniversary.
Yes,
that they did it for. That was really well done, and that sort of narrative of it's almost like a reimagining of that happening. It would just be I love a narrative.
Yeah, you do love a narrative.
That would just be it would make an incredible film. It's one of those sort of beating all adversity and coming through. That is what that story would be, and that's what entices me in as someone who enjoys stories. That would be incredible. Yeah, I know it's people have died, and that's bad, obviously, and it's not nice to profit from the dead, and that's not the intention. It's just
no. But I know what you mean. If it was something, I mean, obviously we speak of United, but this could be any team.
It could absolutely be any. Well, like I said, Chapeauense is the most recent
of course,
example.
Yeah.
Where they have had an entire team bar one player depleted. They all perished.
Yes.
In that incident. And yes, you're going to have some clubs that are going to pull together and help teams along. But imagine if that happened, because more and more teams are taking planes for short haul flights, whether it be across for the European games, but also the inland games. They if you're flying from Manchester to say London, it's quicker to fly than it is to get a coach.
Of course.
And it's probably cheaper, in all honesty, if they charter a plane, especially with all the Emirates sponsorship deals that seem to be getting flown about.
Oh yes. Turkish Airlines at United, but yeah, I know what you mean. And I suppose the more time they're in there, the increase the risk of something going wrong. It would touch wood. Let's make a point here of saying we hope none of this happens. But I get where you're coming from a narrative perspective. And I think if anything bad was to happen to United, maybe not quite so bad, but a severe dip in form, even say United now went on and didn't win a single league game for the rest of the season and ended in 8th or 9th, I would still feel duty bound to come back and do them again next year, because it would be unjust.
I suppose it doesn't matter if it's unlikely to happen in real life, we'll admit that. But if it happened in game, say you were in another save and it happened in game and you noticed it, would you have to take that job or at least apply for it, regardless of where you were?
Well, get this, a few years ago, and it obviously more than a few years ago now, because it was when Sir Alex was still in the job, but I purposely went out of my way to not choose United, and I would be maybe Borussia Dortmund, or I would maybe be Napoli or Fiorentina or something like that, but with my end goal to be approached for the job when Fergie resigns. And it's happened once. 2 games it didn't happen, and I applied for the job and got told to not let the door hit my ass on the way out. But it did happen once, and that was, it sounds daft, but it was almost out of respect for Sir Alex, me not wanting to step onto the game and kick him out of the job. So I would go elsewhere with a view to going to United. And I suppose if I was in a current save right now, or on FM 18, and we'll, for the purpose of this, we'll say if I was doing a YouTube save, and it was content that was going on YouTube, unless I had a solid narrative and a solid defining finish to said save. So we'll lay it out. Let's say I was Derby County, and I'd won the Premier League the year before, and we were chasing the Champions League this year, and the United job come out, I would feel compelled to take the United job regardless of where they were in the league, because that's my club. So I think, yes, I absolutely would. If it was going to piss everybody off, I wouldn't. But I would certainly be saying in a video, look, the job's available, what do we do? Drop it in the comments, because I'll be honest, I want to take it. Do you lot want me to take it? But yeah, I as I say, and I think that's as a fan, I'm sure you probably feel the same about Blackburn. If you were in a save and the job was available because it was in a particularly bad situation and you felt that would be a struggle that would be worth getting out of, I'm sure you'd want the move too. But that's because our, soppy as it sounds, but our hearts belong to a club. We can sit here and play Football Manager all we want, managing, let's say, Grêmio in Brazil, but it doesn't matter if you don't support them, you know. So I think if your supported team ends up knocking or comes knocking, or you know that you're being with a good shout of getting that job on Football Manager, I think, well, any fan worth the salt would want to do it. Whether they did it or not, they would certainly want to.
I pretty much wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying there, and in fact that's kind of what bore Return of the Rovers. I actually had I'm not supposed to really delve too much into my own history, just in case I need to return to it at some point should emergencies occur, i.e. a guest doesn't arrive. But I had a save with Blackburn on Championship Manager 0102, which was perhaps one of my greatest saves ever, or at least longest saves, and I will save the reasons as to why. But the reason why I wanted to have that, and almost the reason why Return of the Rovers sort of it was a play on words to me personally in a number of ways, because it was the first time that in a long time where I'd actually managed Blackburn. I went after that save, I didn't want to manage them again, because I don't think I could replicate it, and that's what put me off it.
You'd be chasing the dream, and it
indeed,
would never quite get there.
It was almost a case of chasing nostalgia, I thought, really, of trying to, and I didn't think I could ever get that back. So I always picked sort of lower league teams and built them up. But it's interesting you're saying about Ferguson before, because on 0102 he would famously retire after the first season. It was hard coded for him to retire, because that's what he had said. That's when he was going to retire, and obviously he didn't retire then for a long while after that. I don't know if they ever patched it out. So I just think he would always retire at the end of that. And the odd thing, I thought it was almost always one of two managers that would get. I think it was Charlie Riat was one of them. I think he was at Barca at the time.
Yeah. And
Jupp Heynckes, I think, perhaps was the other. I might be wrong. But I believe it was a German coach that always used to get it. It was really odd. Or actually, I did see once Arsene Wenger getting it, but then Wenger would do exactly the same and retire fairly shortly after Ferguson had. So it was a bit of an odd one. Anyway, we'll move on to our final question.
Ooh.
And a sour note to end on, potentially, depending on whether you've got the stones to answer it or not. But have you ever been sacked?
I've been playing Football Managers on and off for 20 years. I must have been sacked umpteen times. Umpteen times. As a younger lad, I mean, me and my brother went into this blind. You know, we didn't. Even way back then, when there wasn't that much to Football Manager, I'll be brutally honest, or Championship Manager, should I say, you still had to have an element of knowing what was going on, and playing two men at the back was never going to work. But
strange that.
Yeah,
I tried that.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm God's gift to football management, because I'm not. I can be brutally honest and say I have no recollection in recent memory, say last 2 or 3 games, where I've been sacked. But then I've never really been in a situation where the sack was looming, because I play often quite well. But I often like to manage big teams. I like to challenge big teams. I like to take on Wolfsburg in Germany and try and topple Bayern Munich and things like that. So never really been in a position where I've decided, well, do you know what? I'm going to be Hull, you know, and probably be facing this sack within 3 months. So a lot of it is down to the way I play the game. I do feel I do quite well with a lower team anyway. Based on the fact of the way I play the game and tactics and players, you know, it doesn't take too long. I almost hate knowing about wonder kids and cheap buys and gems.
I completely agree with that.
I hate it, because I remember, when was it? 2 years ago. Do you remember Balanta? He's actually playing somewhere in Switzerland or something. Basel. Is he at Basel?
Eder Balanta.
Eder Balanta. Eder Alvarez Balanta from... he's Colombian. Is he Colombian?
Yes.
Right. So, a few years ago, there was Balanta, and there was a few other players. Oh, what's his name? Lucas Romero. He was brilliant central midfield centre. He's Argentinian, played out at Velez or someone. I think it was Velez. Absolutely, like you buy him for like 4 million, and I think by the time he'd got off the plane, he was worth 20. And because I knew about these players, I found it so bloody hard not to buy them because they cost you nothing, and they were within a season, genuinely within a season, they are Premiership quality world class players. Within 1 year, and I hate knowing that. I hate knowing of these players.
It's almost the joy of finding them and developing them into something when you don't necessarily know that they're going to come off.
Yeah, totally. Well, in my opinion, regens are where it's at on this game. Some of the regens that I've seen come through compared to some of the, sort of doing a bit of an air quote here, but wonder kids when you start the game. I've seen regens on my Fergie Way series now 4 seasons in that wipe the floor with most of the wonder kids that started the game. But I feel, back on point, I feel that if I did take on a smaller club, because of my knowledge of wonder kids and who's available on the game and sort of the cheap bargain buys, staff members, the great staff members that are available, Phil Cannon, legend. But because I know, legend. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But because I know of these people, I couldn't go to Hull and say to myself, do you know what? I'm not going to go for Phil Cannon. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to sign Kuke because they're available and I can afford them and I can get them and I know they're instantly going to make the team better. I will do it. So I think when you go to manage a smaller team, if you have game knowledge, it's a bit skewed. Immediately.
What I've tried to do myself is almost avoid them, intentional wonder kids. Like I don't look at that side. I sometimes frequent the SI forums. I look at like blog posts and things like that, but I always try to avoid anything that gives anything away about the potential of a player's future.
Yeah.
Because it ruins the game for me. I like that little bit of surprise, and yeah, it may transpire that I find out that he's a wonder kid that everyone knows about anyway. But I've still found him. I've not found him by just knowledge and knowing.
Yeah.
You when you sort of stumble across them, it makes that experience that much richer. I find totally,
and that's what I say about the regens. It's nice finding a great regen. One thing, as a bigger club, I have done in the past. I no longer do it because it basically almost ruined a save for me a few years ago. But I don't do the whole regen day thing because I think it's cheating. It sounds harsh, but do you know when regen day comes along and then you can highlight all the players, get them scouted, get a good idea of who's what, and then basically nick them from another club before they've even had a chance to do anything about it. I don't do that. I think I would do it if I was lower league and I felt that I could snatch myself players not just who could make an impact in the team but financially help me as a club, but as a bigger club I don't do it. I tend to let them get stuck in their own club, and then as someone like say Manchester United in the Fergie way, I mean I'm regularly getting 150 200 million pound transfer budgets, so if a club want 12 million pound for this young lad, then fine, there you go. Job done.
Look, I mean, what helps me enjoy the experience, and it's probably something that doesn't necessarily come across in my videos because of the way I edit things, and I'm not sure whether people want to see it. But like when I'm scouting players, I will scout them properly. I'll sometimes take risks on them because you can't necessarily see all their attributes. But what I like using is sort of not Moneyball as such, but going for that sort of approach, not necessarily trusting that star rating, but seeing where they've played, because you can look at what positions they've played in,
yes,
how
absolutely.
well they've played, and then also like their key attribute, key sort of statistics, like how good their passing is, how many shots on target they've had, the ratio of shots on target to shots off target, how many goals they've scored per 90 minutes, all of that sort of stuff. I love looking at that and thinking and judging, is he actually going to be good enough or not? Because he may well say, oh, he's 4.5 stars, but if his performances don't back that up, either my scouts tell him porky pies, or something's gone a cropper and he's not being played right, and maybe he's still worth the punt. But you can't. I like the fact that you can't necessarily trust players purely on their attributes, and that they've got like their personality affects how they will potentially turn out. So you've got the likes of Ravel Morrison, who attribute wise he's incredible, but attitude-wise destroys him completely because he just cannot be asked to bother. And mainly that's he's got low work rate, so he's just not asked. But then he'll have other sort of hidden attributes, and I'm doing the air quotes now, that also determine how lazy he actually is and how disruptive he's likely to be, and his just general personality towards teammates, the media, and all of that sort of stuff that you can't actually see. You can kind of uncover it in scout reports, and you get like suggested bits that might imply how he's going to behave, but you can never guarantee that and how that's actually going to affect him on the pitch. No. I always like it when it says enjoys a big game.
Yes,
and things, and then the worst one, which is he's the complete opposite, and he doesn't fancy a meaty clash against one of your rivals.
Yeah,
but that bit really sort of enhances the immersion for me. You can almost kid yourself that maybe I'm a real manager for once, rather than just moving dots around on a screen.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Ravel Morrison. As a United fan, I went through the whole sort of shooting caboodle with what he was up to.
I like that phrase, by the way.
Shooting caboodle.
Shooting caboodle. That's lovely.
Get it in you. But yeah, obviously being a United fan, it was discussed quite heavily at the time, and I still now view him as such a wasted talent, because the talent was there. It's just a shame his sort of, I don't know, extracurricular activities, shall we say, outside and away from Old Trafford, and it's obviously had a massive effect on his career and his career path, which is a shame. It's
really interesting seeing the trajectory of his career versus, say, the likes of Pogba, or to a lesser extent the likes of Piqué. They're all youth players that were brought in and then sought moves away for whatever reason, whether it be that attitude, whether it be the fact that the playing time wasn't there for them. And then with more for the likes of Piqué and Pogba, they've obviously got incredible ability at such a young age.
Yes,
and are just chomping up the bit to showcase that. And whoever the manager is at the time is not willing to. I mean, it was Ferguson, and I think they were some of his worst decisions. When, particular, I mean, this is from a non-United fan's perspective.
Yeah.
So take it with a pinch of salt or whatever, but from someone outside looking in, when you need a central midfielder, and you had needed a central midfielder for such a long time, this was at the point when Scholes was being brought back from retirement at 38.
Yes.
When you've got Paul Pogba waiting, and instead you just let him go for pennies to Juve because you don't trust him.
Yeah, I think agents played a big part in it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Sir Alex would always say that he equally, maybe not one of his finest moments, not one of his finest decisions. However, he may also say it's probably one of the best decisions he's ever made, because I think Pogba's become the player that he has because he's had the freedom. I'm not sure he would have ever got at United. Even if he'd walked into the team, there would have always been the next big star to come along who United would have been interested in buying, which would have pushed him down the pecking order.
But you could argue the same for Juve. Juve are probably, success-wise, they are the most successful team in Italy, and at the moment they are the team to beat. They've got star players that they always have had. So I don't necessarily agree with that point, but I kind of agree that we will never know how he would have turned out had he have stayed at United, and had he have been given those opportunities to shine, because it's a different environment that he's grown up in with different players. So we don't know how much influence the players around him would have had on how he played, and maybe it was the case that the way Juve played really suited him. It meant that he can focus on one particular area rather than having to do multiple roles within the team, kind of like he does at United, to be honest. He's expected to be the heartbeat of the team, and also he's got added pressure.
He's got the price tag pressure.
Absolutely. When he was at Juve, he did not have that.
No.
He had that people were maybe expecting things for him because we've just signed this youth player from United, and then all of a sudden he actually delivers on that promise.
Yeah.
And he did it very quickly. I remember his first season there, and he was hitting headlines because it was like, how have United let this one go?
Yeah.
It was one of those really, really bizarre footballing situations.
But what a fairy tale.
Absolutely.
That he's back. You know, as a United fan, obviously a lot of people who are maybe not United fans will look at it and go, well, Jesus Christ, you've paid 90 million quid. And I read an interesting interview there with Mourinho the other day. And I totally agree, and I spoke about this. I'm not going to hang around on this too long because it's not exactly Football Manager, but £90 million today is not what £90 million was when, say, United bought Ruud van Nistelrooy. From a turnover percentage of business, the percentage-wise are actually very similar. Now, we've bought Paul Pogba for 90 million quid, but in the same year, players like Benteke are moving for £30 million. You know, but the question right now is, what's going to happen this summer? Do you think? Here's a question for you, Matt. Do you think that Pogba will still be the world record transfer fee in the summer?
Ooh, I mean, who would you suggest could command a bigger transfer fee?
Sergio Aguero.
Arguably, yes. I think that's if he was to go to,
and that's
to
coming
Real
from a
Madrid.
United fan. Now, I don't think Aguero's going to probably want a big move to a big club in Europe. I'll be brutally honest. I think he's ready to cash in his chips and head home, as it were. I think. However, there are players like Aguero that are kicking round who could command more money than Pogba.
Do you think maybe Neymar?
Well, you see, that's an interesting one because Neymar's had obviously, there's been issues, shall we say, in Spain.
The tax related
yes,
things.
Yes. So with the likes of PSG who have been known to, shall we say, Acosta Real Madrid over the likes of Ronaldo or Barcelona over the likes of Messi and I forget the owner's name. Is it? It's one of the sheikhs anyway. You know, loaded, absolutely loaded, and is in the past made reference to quite happily dropping 200 million quid on the likes of Leo Messi and stuff. So the point I'm making is Pogba's transfer may not be eclipsed this summer. I actually think it will, but it may not be. But how many other players now are going to be costing 60 and 70 million quid based on the current money available, especially in the Premier League? When the lower end teams, and this is going to sound terrible because they won the league last year, but from a business point of view, Leicester City went out and spent, was it 78 million quid? You know, now they may have went ahead and won the league, fair dues, but from a financial standpoint, not the greatest, not really. They're not great backing. Obviously, they've got the king power behind them and whatnot. But these teams that are lower in the league, Crystal Palace, you know, they're all going out and spending 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 million quid on players. And then there was a surprise that the biggest club in England went out and spent £90 million on one player. It just, I don't know, it's beggars belief. I'd say it's a defensive United fans viewpoint on everything. But there's one thing for sure, you know, if I'd have had the choice of buying 2 Raheem Sterlings or 1 Paul Pogba, I know which one I would go for. And?
Are you going to leave us on a cliffhanger? Or are you
I don't think I need to answer, surely. I don't need to answer.
I was merely goading.
I know. But yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a very, very passionate and very biased Manchester United fan.
At least you admit it.
And
you don't come from London or Surrey or any of the surrounding boroughs.
I feel very privileged. I was born, I would say, bus journey or I suppose car journey now, but bus journey 5 minutes out of Manchester city centre is where I was sort of born and bred. So I do feel quite fortunate that I was born a United fan who was born in Manchester. But
the other alternative option is that you've had the opposite of elocution lessons. Not that I'm saying you're not very well spoken, but you know, you get what I mean.
I am a mank. Yeah.
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 We don't say money. We say money.
Money.
With an E and a H on the end. But
well, at least we understand each other, and that's all that matters, really.
Absolutely.
So that's probably as good a point as ever to round it off. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, Toby.
Or should I say
Toby?
Toby. You're very welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Before I let you go, I have to let you plug your stuff as you've lent me your time so kindly. So where can people find you and what are you currently doing if they haven't already gathered?
I'm sure they've already gathered, but my current save's called The Fergie Way. It's based on Manchester United and me trying to play. I say play the game Sir Alex's way, but I play the game my own way, really. I've always sort of tried to introduce youth into the first team at the earliest opportunity and carry them through until they basically hit the top of their game. And that's on YouTube, as I say, The Fergie Way or TeachFM. You'll find me on there. And you can also find me on Twitter at teach__FM, which is a really bad handle because obviously someone beat me to it. Tossers.
Well, the links will be in the description as ever, so it makes it easy for lazy people. I thank you all for your time for listening. I thank Toby once again for his time. If you've enjoyed this episode of #Narrative, please pop a like on there for me. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. I have a new series out that's only a few episodes deep so far. That is the Homegrown Hotspur. I've ruined that. It's Homegrown Hotspur. Hotspur. What am I saying? Hotspur. I can say it now. It's fine. Homegrown Hotspur. Yes, finally. It's a homegrown challenge with Tottenham Hotspur trying to fend off the perils of Brexit that might or may not happen. So maybe you'll enjoy that. If you watch only one thing of it, watch the first episode because the intro is absolutely epic. Hopefully that I'm not overselling that a bit too much. I don't think I am.
I don't think you are either.
Excellent.
It was epic.
Thank you. The intro, right? Yeah, not anything else. Just yeah. Okay, we'll move on. So snoop around the channel whilst you're here. See if you like anything more. But other than that, it is goodbye from Toby.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from me, and it's probably goodbye from Kev, somewhere in the world, wherever he's loitering. Anyway, folks, I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.